This is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel, and today we're going to be talking about empathy. Because, I look at the news a lot and I see stuff in the world and I think, how is it people can do things like that? And then I look at other people, and because these things are going on all the time, we seem to lose connection with them. We seem to create almost a barrier to our connection to things that are going on. And there's some horrible things going on around the world. So I thought I'd have a look at this. And the key for me is this one, empathy. What's happening with empathy? So, what is empathy? And I've got some notes. From Cambridge Dictionary, it says, empathy is the ability to share someone else's feelings or experiences by imagining what it would be like to be in that person's situation. So you can get that. You can look at somebody and you can go, God, what would it feel like to be like that? So this is interesting. Collins English Dictionary says empathy is the power of understanding and imaginatively entering into another person's feelings. So imagining that you're becoming that person and imagining how they would feel in the particular situation they're in. Collins American, however, says empathy is the projection of one's own personality into another personality of another to understand the person better, ability to share in others' emotions, thoughts and feelings. So a slightly different perspective. The English version, we imaginatively enter into someone else's personality. In the American version, we actually project our own personality into the other person. And of course, that is not necessarily correct, because it's not what our personality feels, it's what their personality feels. But let's go on. Now, a UK YouGov survey finds that 51% of people think that empathy has declined, compared with only 12% who think it has increased. So it's an idea that empathy has declined. And I kind of wondered why, because it might be naive, but my thoughts is that all human beings, or at least 99.999%, are good. They do care. They are good people. Obviously, there are some that are not, but in the vast majority they are. So how can empathy be declining? Well, let's have a look at the clauses of how empathy might be declining. We more and more communicate digitally. And of course, that means by social media. Now, so this means a reduction in face-to-face communication, face-to-face interactions, and we also have a certain anonymity that reduces accountability and therefore empathy. I see the blogs every morning. I get MSN and it shows the sort of headlines of newspapers. You can drill into the article and stuff. And I see in the blogs in there a lot of people using anonymous names, which means they can say whatever they like without any kind of consequence, because no one knows who they are except the system, Microsoft or whatever. And we do these things by texting and email, messaging, for example, WhatsApp, social media, for example, Facebook. And I can remember back in my days as an IT guy, I would warn my team against texts, simply because texts are good because they communicate what might be called scientific or data-driven messages. What they don't convey is emotion. And very few of us have the ability to correctly convey emotion through the written word. And then there's the question, is what I'm saying about my emotions, does that mean the same to you who is getting the text message? And often the case is not. Okay. So, of course, in the world, we value our individuality. we also are independence. And the more we have independence and individuality, the more we kind of distance ourselves from things. People become more introverted. They're focused on the self and less inclined to become part of the bigger human community. We have desires for personal success, and that can cause a growing distance from others, especially understanding and appreciating the needs and feelings of others. An example of that might be, whereas if you are, say, a team leader, I've always thought you show yourself to be a good team leader in the fact that you support your team, the fact that you look after your team, the fact that you kind of blow up your team as far as their importance and value are to the company. A lot of managers don't work like that. They blame their team. Because anything goes wrong, oh, it wasn't, this idiot that works for me, I'm sorry about that, I'll get rid of him or her. And I'm like, no, it's all down to how well you run your team. And that's good for me and good for the team. Don't know. I mean, there's this thing called the business, and I met this when I lived in the United States, and the idea of the business was almost like a confessional, a forgiveness thing. That if it was good for the business, then no matter how ugly or cruel it was okay. Because, hey, it's business. That's what we do in the United States of America. And to some extent in the UK as well. Things done in the name of good business and survival. Because usually you're in a toxic environment where everybody's wrestling to get up to the top or wrestling to keep their job or whatever. That's how it can be. It can be, it can exclude this or decrease the idea of caring and your feelings towards others. Now, another thing about that is you'll sometimes get to do things. I would be asked to categorize or objectify my team and be told, because you knew what was coming, can you list your team in value to the company from 1 to 10? So 1 being the least, 10 being the most. And I'd say no. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, because I'm a good manager, all of my teams start at good, because I've worked with them, coached them, sent them on courses, whatever, to make them good. So the lowest one, number 1, is good. And the top one is 10. I said, but nobody in my team's not good. How can I do that? The other thing is if you try and objectify it down to one number, you might have somebody on your team who's very good at their jobs. Let's say, because I was in IT, let's say they're very good at database administration. So you've got somebody who's a whiz kid at database administration, but because he's very focused into the numbers and the bits and the bytes and all this kind of stuff, not very good at communicating. And so if he was asked to do a presentation, he wouldn't be very good at all. Yeah, I've got somebody who's down there at number 1 who's good. Not as good as the guy who's number 10, but a whiz kid at communication. Everybody likes him, listens to him, laughs at his jokes, that kind of thing. He's the guy you're going to ask to do the presentation. But he's going to use the information provided by the guy at number 10. So you can't rate them from 1 to 10 as simple as that. Nevertheless, your bosses would push you to it because you knew that a layoff was coming and they were going to take out number 1, number 2. They do the same with wages too. They'd say, oh yeah, well, you've got to follow the bell curve. And the bell curve is like a graph that kind of goes like this, whereas the middle's there. And it's rubbish in any other way other than using it for academia, where you use that to compare one exam with another exam. So one exam might be easy, one exam may be difficult. So the bell curves will be the same. That is, the majority of people would get this, the least people would get that. But that peak would be in different places on the curve. So you could move it, centralize it and say, right, that means we've scored the exam in a way that makes them both fair. The difficult exam, we made the pass mark a little bit lower. The easy exam, we made the pass mark a little bit higher. So the same amount of people pass it, the same amount of people get the top scores, the same amount of people get the bottom scores. You get it. Another business thing is national security, which could be anything. And we see that in the world nowadays. National security could be a threat of military action from another country. Okay. Tough to argue with that one, if it's true and not just propaganda. However, national security in some circumstances may also be considered about trade. That if somebody else is out trading you, they're producing more products, perhaps better quality products, that's not a national security issue. It's a competitive issue whereby you need to improve your competitiveness so that you can, work with them on a level playing field. But if you just say, oh, that's a national security carrier, we're going to tariff, sanction, all the things they do nowadays, that's not really dealing with the issue because your productivity, your quality, your quantity has not changed. You get that idea. And, and you can ask yourself, well, how do these leaders make these kind of decisions that actually hurt other people, like layoffs? We used to have a visit from the CFO, that's the Chief Financial Officer, and he would come, and every time he came, he would take all the managers out for a real swish dinner and everything like this, and everybody knew the reason he was there was to cut some people from the workforce. And my teams used to come to me and say, how can he do that? How can he sleep at night? And I'd say, well, the business. His job is to look at the bottom line of a spreadsheet and look at the numbers and say, if we do this and that and this and that further up here, we end up with less outgoings, more incomings. It's a good decision. Let's do it. And doesn't care because he's not related to human beings. He's related to numbers on a spreadsheet and the bottom line. And then there's this phrase for the highest good. Well, what does that mean? In a sort of a more esoteric, some might say new age or, more of that kind of new age social networks and stuff. For the highest good would be something spiritual or esoteric. But for the highest good might be what a government or a controlling body has decided is for the highest good. But is it for the highest good for the population, the citizens like me and you? Or is it the highest good for them? There we are. We'll see. So there also seems to be an intentional drive. It's like a tribalism, whereby you divide and you conquer. Because if you can say those people over there are our enemies or we don't like them, it's easier for us to not show empathy towards them. Because they're the other side. Or these are black and these are right. Or these are left or these are right. Or red or blue or whatever it is, the differentiation. And if you cut those things up into small blocks of people, they're easier to manage. They're easier to appeal to through advertising, propaganda and stuff like that. Obviously, empathy then is reduced by those people who are not on our side. We are here. They are there or there. So they're not us. So we don't like them. We don't show empathy. We don't care about their feelings. All part of the decline of empathy. And once you've identified the other side, you can treat them without compassion. Now, we've talked about reduced human interaction. And remote work does that, online information, and also education, because a lot of education nowadays is online. There's virtual communication, so using, team systems to communicate. You don't actually meet the people, you just see them as little screens, and that you see them talking and so on. But it's fewer opportunities for face-to-face interactions, and face-to-face interactions are very important for really good communication. The non-verbal aspects in a person, where a person-to-person meeting is held, such as, facial expression or body language, they're important in developing empathy because you relate to one and each other, and you can see more that the use of particular words mean one thing that you may not have picked up if it was just a text. You could Brits they've got this wonderful, cynical, sarcastic sense of humour, and you could use the phrase, "Oh, I feel really bad about that," you know. And if you combine that with, "Oh yeah, I feel bad about that," it doesn't mean bad. It actually means I don't feel bad. So it's that kind of thing. Person-to-person communication is always better. So how could we improve empathy? And this is where we get a lot of kind of websites and stuff come out with all these words, but they don't really mean much practically. You can provide emotional education, both formally and at home. And what I'm talking about there is you can provide it in terms of an education. So you're doing a college degree or a qualification or certification or something like that, or at home with your family. Education, teaching your children about how to work well in the world, how to deal with other people, how to be empathic towards their feelings, so at least you have a better understanding of where they are coming from. Yeah? Educators say that empathy can be taught by instructing young people, or any people to be honest, about emotional intelligence, active listening, and conflict resolution. Words, right? Words. What do they mean? Well, emotional intelligence is being aware of one's own and others' emotions. So if you can understand that somebody's really upset about something, you would approach them in a certain way. You would accelerate the situation. You'd want to calm them down so that you could have a proper, meaningful dialogue. If you met somebody that doesn't care, you might want to get into their head and send them messages that they do care. There's also active listening. Now, this is really important because often people don't listen. And when you're face to face, your eyes can often give it away, because if you're looking straight at the person, you get it as you're talking to them. If your eyes are over there when you're talking to them, you may not be listening, and they know it. That's the thing, and they immediately assume, this guy's not interested in what I've got to say. So active listening is important, that you understand the message, the emotions, the intent. You are present. You are there with the other person in connection, that you are showing interest in what they're saying and responding with consideration. Now, little responses are very important, you know. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I get that. Little things like this, just to show that you're actually listening to what they're saying and that you are participating in the conversation, even though you're not talking, they are, and you are listening to it. Conflict resolution. Well, there's a thing that happens, obviously, a lot of time about families and stuff like this, and they're tough. But if you can understand the perspectives, if you can address concerns, if you can understand where the other person's coming from, then it makes it easier to find an acceptable solution, even though that acceptable solution might be some kind of my position's here, your position's there. Let's do that and come to a compromise. Often the best way to deal with things. Okay. Now, this may sound a bit woo-woo, but it's true. Encourage mindfulness and self-reflection. And we don't give ourselves time to think. When I go on in a waiting room, I have learnt to do nothing. I don't immediately get my phone out. I don't immediately watch the telly that's on the wall. No, I'll just sit there and allow my mind to think, because people rarely do that nowadays. And surprising how many outcomes you can come to. Or you can just have a nice time dealing with your own thoughts or stuff, or just listening and so on. Listening to what's going on around you, getting a feel for the place. You can also do things like mindfulness and what they call reconnection. In other words, getting back in tune with yourself. That's kind of what mindfulness is about. It's becoming present within yourself. You can that way you'll become more aware of your own emotions. Plus, If you process emotions, you might feel strongly about something, and if you give yourself time to think about it, those emotions will become less hot. They will come down in temperature a bit, so that when you talk to somebody or something, you can approach, yes, you feel strongly about something, but you won't approach it from a position of anger. All right? Also makes you understand the emotions of the other person. Encouraging self-reflection and gaining a better understanding of the connection between human experiences, because you may have learned something about something that I really need to learn something from. I think every interaction that you have, you learn a tiny little thing, sometimes huge things, but also a tiny little thing. Even if you don't agree with what the person's saying, at least you've considered and validated your own opinions. All right? Being open-minded. Gosh, that's a big one. Open-minded. If you close your mind to all these different things, imagine in science, if you closed your mind to the concept of quantum physics and said, smallest thing is the atom. It's rubbish. And people have done this in science, for example, for many, 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 many years. And somebody who comes up with a theory is kind of kicked out, sent to Coventry, whatever, because they come up with something that everybody said, can't be that, can't be that. And then 30 years down the road, they realise, oh my God, I think he was right. But if you're open-minded, you just accept, you don't have to believe it. You just let it come in and you just say, okay, I'm going to shelve that away to the side somewhere like this. But I'm not going to throw it away because it might be right. Or it might be right in the future. Give yourself time to think. Take a breath. I find that when something happens and it's quite emotional, I give it 24 hours. Sleep on it is the phrase they use. And it really works for me because the next day I've got a different thing, because overnight all my mind, not just my conscious mind, but my subconscious mind has had time to process and work on these things and order these things out. And I might wake up with a slightly different idea and say, oh yeah, I could understand how that person feels that way, the empathy, how they feel that way. I can understand that. It's not just because I hate them and they're nasty. No. I can understand how they feel that way. All right. So you can also, building up, improving empathy, is join communities, right? And that could be communities online, to be honest, but it could also be communities at work, volunteer work, for example. Lots of volunteers needed in various ways. You could join social clubs. You could join public forums. That's probably going to be online. Although you could attend a town hall or whatever it is, this sort of thing, because you feel bad about the roundabout down the road that they haven't put any traffic lights on, which is a real example. Connecting, sharing experiences, developing mutual understanding is all this way of improving your empathy. So you can use technology. Now, we talked about technology and said, yeah, it can kind of push us away from that direct communication. But you can use it in a good way. You can use technology to improve empathy using digital platforms to share stories. Maybe it's about, I don't know, acts of kindness. And have meaningful conversations. Again, do remember that if you're doing it in a text-based format, you're not really conveying emotions. So try and avoid any kind of thought of emotions. I like this, love this, hate this, none of that. Because really, the person at the other end may not understand exactly what you mean. Well, you said you hate this. Yeah, I was only really saying that I didn't like it very much. I didn't mean hate. And if you were face to face, that probably would come out in a conversation. But in text, that may not come across. You can use technology to show acts of kindness and stuff like that. And be careful of overestimating the understanding of people's emotions in the use of technology. Just what I've been talking about. Because my understanding of a text may not be your understanding of the text. It may not be what you meant when you sent it. You know. If you can, use a phone, which is better because you can hear the voice. So you can hear the timbre, the volume, the tone of the voice, which gives you a clue to how somebody feels a little bit deeper. And a video call, then you've got a visual that you can relate to, so you can see facial expressions, and if you're like me, you can see the hands waving about and stuff. It's really good. Much better. Things like WhatsApp are awesome because you can do that across the world. Awesome stuff like that. Just beware. Okay. So, kind of in summary, you can say empathy is essential in both the small and the large worlds we live in. So I'm kind of talking like at the family level, work, social, all this kind of thing, growing, right up to the global level. And the benefits of achieving harmony. So homeostasis is a scientific word for it. In families, at work, in society, around the world, vital to our healthy existence. Empathy should be shown at all levels. This is why a lot of these big things that are going on in the world at the moment, it doesn't start getting resolved until people actually start talking to each other and then opening their minds enough to understand at least where the other person's coming from, even if they don't agree. At least they understand it. And suspending judgment can also allow better understanding, because not jumping to conclusions, but suspending your judgment on something. That's rubbish. No. Just think, I don't really like that, but I'll have a think about it. I'll be open-minded. I'll let it stir for a bit, see if I can get a better understanding of where the person's coming from. So it allows a better, suspending judgment allows a better understanding and fosters a more empathic approach. Narcissism. Now, there are psychological issues, and I'm not really going to go deeply into this, but the fact is some people are narcissistic. You might be able to think of an example or two right now. It's where you focus on yourself and you have a need for admiration and also a disregard of others, which means you don't listen to their opinions. And there are various degrees of narcissism, ranging from a personality trait, so you might be a little uncaring about other people and tend not to listen to people, or a personality disorder, which can be kind of dangerous. The amount of empathy or compassion a narcissist demonstrates varies. So somebody could be, diagnosed is the wrong word, but identified as a narcissist. But it's because they're a bit narcissistic and they care a bit much about themselves and they tend to focus on their own opinions rather than other people's. That happens a lot, and it's not terrible. It's just something you'd have to work with. Whereas somebody who's completely a narcissist and just doesn't care about anybody else, that's a different thing. Because they're more interested in their own personal needs. If you are a narcissist, and you may not want to admit it, but if you develop an idea of self-compassion, because often it's a matter of needing to forgive yourself and say, well, this is the way I am, but also say, but I don't have to be this way. If I understand this is the way I am, then in conversations where you do something that might be defined as narcissistic, you can go, here I am being narcissistic. I need to listen to this other person. I need to understand their needs a bit more. Even if I still make the same decision, at least I need to understand it. So can you be too empathic or not empathic enough? Well, some people put the feelings of other people before themselves. They almost become, what's the right word? A servant of the other person. They ignore their own needs, and that can lead to some problems, things like anxiety and depression, because they're not taking care of themselves. And then you can go right up the scale to a psychopath. Psychopaths are generally manipulative, self-serving, but they're clever. And so they can outwardly mimic empathy, intelligence. They're often charming because it's almost like a cloak they put on, a game they play. Because they know they don't care, but they pretend to care, and they're good at it, a lot of them. But a true psychopath does not feel empathy. Now, a sociopath, and again, these are just psychological terms, but a sociopath is more impulsive and erratic, and they usually lack empathy. Okay. So what about burnout? What is that related to empathy? Well, people who help other people are generally quite or highly empathic. Because when they're helping someone else who's in distress, they do feel something for that person that's in distress. And that can build up and create issues in the helper. Because if you're, a first responder or something like that, you're dealing with this on a daily basis. Seeing people in distress, hurt, upset, all that kind of thing, pouring onto you. So a lot of first responders and people like this have to develop kind of a shield. It's not that they don't care. They just have to do their job first before they open up to that caring response. They do their job first. So some shield against full empathy has to develop. Now, I know in my own life, when my first daughter died, I had a breakdown, I think. Don't know. Lost 2 weeks of my life. Gone. And I had, at the time, I was military, martial arts, coach, trainer, whatever, all technology, engineering side of things, all stuff of that. But all of that just blew away. My emotions, and particularly my empathy, were wide open. And so I had to learn strategies to build some kind of shield against my empathic response against things. But it's still there. And I still need to use those strategies to make sure I can do the things I need to do. So like when you arrive at a car crash and you jump in with thinking, you get into the fray and you help out because there's no police or first responders there. So you help out without getting empathic, because then you just melt down and can't do anything. So it's building a little bit of a barrier, but it's a bit different from being a sociopath or a psychopath. I like to watch police shows. I like to watch Blue Light, which is about newbie coppers, policemen I should say, I'm sorry. Police Interceptors, which is about car chases and stuff like this, quite exciting. Forensics, the real CSI, and forensic psychology, profiling, criminal behaviour, serial killers, all of that. And the reason I watch it is because I'm fascinated that people can think a certain way, and I can't. I can't imagine how some of these people do the things they do. Absolutely uncaring, without empathy. Absolutely couldn't care less about their victim. Or just avoid the thought of even thinking about a victim as they're driving at 150 miles an hour down an A road. Not even thinking about the fact that someone might walk out with their dog and poof, they're gone. And it's like they don't even think about it. And that's why I like to watch it, because it puts my feet on the ground and thinks, how is it people can think like that? And some of them are just truly thoughtless, but some of them are truly different. And that's a very, very minor, a rare population, but it still exists. And I find it fascinating. And you see the worst and the best, don't you? You see the criminals showing some or complete disregard of others. They could be psychopaths, sociopaths. Another thing that happens nowadays is drugs, because drugs themselves alter the mind. But the backside of that is if somebody's an addict, they need to get drugs. And it takes away their moral levels, takes away their empathy for somebody else. They'll break into a house to steal some money or take the keys to the car or something like this. And if they're disturbed, sometimes they just do awful things. What do we do about it? I don't know. If they had more empathy, I can honestly say they would probably just run out of the house or something. But those without empathy don't want to be recognized, so they do horrible things. I don't want to get too deep into it. But on the other side, you saw the police, and you see how the police deal with these various events. And some of them are horrendous and quite upsetting. You also see that they can show empathy, but still do their job. And there are some of those very lovely, well-balanced policemen and women who do this, just are still able to care and are still able to deal with somebody respectfully and all this kind of thing, but still do their job, because their job is to enforce the law. They don't make the laws, they enforce it. Others tend to block emotional response, and you can see them, and they're few and far between, but they were a little bit robotic and they've kind of blocked it out. And I don't blame them. If you're dealing with that every day, it's tough. So putting a nice shield on covers you up and everything. And who knows, when you're off shift, you might get a bit more connected and a bit more concerned and empathic. Some get angry. But of course, anger is a shield as well. As long as you're not using it to beat the suspect up or something like this, you can get angry because it's another shield. It blocks emotion. And it may block emotion because it's your reaction, or the policeman's reaction, to seeing such a lack of empathy by the suspect. So very interesting. And that's why I do. I just enjoy it. I don't know why. Well, that's why. I do know why. So, conclusion. It seems easy to say that we should improve empathy, but it's not so easy to do. It helps to slow down your reactions to things, to not react spontaneously or anything like this. Fine, you need to get out the way of a speeding car, but what I'm talking about is in interpersonal communication and stuff like that, just slow down a bit so that you come back with a more considered response, which is progressive and intelligent and helps to form some kind of, cooperation and coming to some kind of compromise. Give yourself time to get a full understanding. Listen to the other person, active listening. Listen to the other person. Try to understand what they say. If necessary, ask them questions, There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't quite understand what you're trying to tell me. So please, calm down. Help me understand what it is you're saying, what it is your issue, or whatever. That can help a lot. Reserve judgment, resist triggers. Okay. And a response or decision could still be the same. You might still have said, well, I think what you did was wrong. I've listened to what you say and I do understand why you did what was wrong, but it's still wrong. Okay. But it considers the effect that it will have on somebody else, and it will usually be beneficial because you'll understand where they're coming from even if you don't agree with it. That's empathy. Improving empathy in other people can be even more challenging. But if you demonstrate empathy, it will influence others. It's like a lot of these things. If you show that you are controlled and considerate and open-minded to things, and you show intelligence in your responses and so on, that will encourage an empathic response from them. It may not always happen, but at least it moves it on. And then the more people around you act with more empathy, the more they affect others, the more they affect others, and so on. And I think in this world, because we do so much online, that bit's missing. Because we're not conveying true empathy to each other to allow it to spread and grow. And in fact, it does seem, from what I said, because I mentioned the YouTube survey, that actually it's starting to decline. Oh, it is declining, and it's getting quite prevalent and quite dangerous now. You can do things like supporting petitions, surveys, even attending events. You may think, well, I'm just 1 out of 100,000 people. But the fact is, everybody in that 100,000 people thinks I'm just 1 out of 100,000. But together, you are 100,000, which is an important thing. And there are laws that defines what needs to be spoken about in Parliament, for example. I think if you do and did you know that on the government website, there is a petition where I could raise a petition, your own petition, what you think is strong. And then you need to, kind of advertise it somehow, spread the word around so other people go on and sign up to that petition. If it reaches 100,000, I believe that means it has to be discussed in Parliament. Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? You can write to your MPs. That's good, because if you're not on your own, if a bunch of people write to their MP, well, the MP is going to take notice. Any representative kind of has to do that because it's all to do with their votes, but they also may care themselves. They may have empathy too. You can even attend a constitutional surgery, as they call it, where the MP basically has open house and you can go in and you can speak directly, face to face, to get a position, a feeling, a perspective across to your Member of Parliament. Very good. You voted for them after all, or you participated in a vote that made them an MP. Now you have a right to speak to them directly. It's really good. Anyway, that's my ideas on empathy. Hopefully it's got your mind spinning. I mean, I haven't come up with any magic formula that if you do this, then empathy will be re-provided all around the world. Just bear in mind that a lot of the electronic, digital type communications and stuff like this are not very good at providing empathy. And that you might need to follow up with a phone call, follow up with a video call, follow up with a personal meeting. All these kind of things add to that empathy so that you fully understand what somebody else is thinking. Communication exists, and therefore you can come to a good decision at the end of that, in the knowledge that you understand what the other person is thinking, feeling, what their emotions are, their perspectives are, everything. It's all good. It's all good. And there we are. That's my feelings on empathy. Hopefully you learnt something or got you thinking anyway, at least. And there it is. This is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel. Please take care.